Hello, good morning everyone. Do we have some people on the line? Can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. And the attendees are all muted, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. So welcome everyone to the webinar of Roadmap for Renewable Energy Future, the Irena REmap program. And this will be led by Rolf Dielen from the Irena. And I'd just like to say a couple of words at the start to explain why we think this is relevant for what WBCSD is working on and what the WBCSD members are interested in. Because in our Renewable LCTPI program, the Low Carbon Technology Partnership Initiative, we also have a work stream that is looking at renewable integration into systems and markets. But obviously one overspanning topic that affects most that work stream, but also others, really is linked to what resources of renewables are actually available on the ground and how can they be best exploited and used in different countries, considering the different policies, and how can actually those policies be improved to ultimately increase the deployment of renewables. And so Irena was very keen, similarly, to understand more about what business values in the REmap report. And so I think this is a mutual benefited webinar that will hopefully provide us with more information about what Irena is doing, and then is giving Irena some feedback from a business community, what they or you see could be is of main interest to you. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Rolf, who will be leading.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariana. So my name is Dolf Gielen, and Irena is headquartered in Abu Dhabi, but we are today in Bonn, because that's where our Innovation and Technology Center is. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present the REmap. But before moving into that, I thought it would be useful to give you a little bit of background of what is Irena. So the International Renewable Energy Agency, which was established 5 years ago, and which has the mandate to accelerate global renewable energy deployment. And when we talk about renewables, we mean all 6 forms of renewable energy. So that includes biomass, that includes hydro, that includes geothermal, solar, wind and marine. And Irena has grown very rapidly. So initially 5 years ago there were 65 member countries, and right now there is 148 member countries, and there's another 30 or so countries in the process of accession. So it's really a global membership, and in that sense it's different than, for example, the International Energy Agency, which is very much OECD focused. So we have a work program which has 6 components. The component we will be talking about today or the program we're talking about today, REmap, is part of the component on energy sector transformation. But we also have important activities around, for example, collection of energy statistics. So on our website you can find statistics on renewable power sector capacities, and later this month new data will be added on renewable power generation by country. These statistics, to my knowledge, you can't find anywhere else on the web. We have an extensive database of resource maps. That's what we call the atlas. And you can use that type of information to assess country potentials, but also to identify promising locations to develop projects. In terms of project development, we have a number of tools to support that. One of them is called the Project Navigator. That is a set of online guidelines and online tools to develop bankable project proposals. And there's also information in there on financing opportunities. So that is quite widely used now. And we're still expanding that to additional technologies. We do a lot of work on cost of renewables and economics of renewables. In fact, this week only we've issued a new report called the Power to Change: Solar and Wind Cost Reduction Potentials for 2025. And conclusion from that study is that, well, we'll come to that later in this webinar. And we also have some funds for investments. The largest one is the Abu Dhabi Fund for Development. That's a $350 million concessional loan facility for innovative projects, and around half of that has been issued now, and a significant share of that is used for island projects. Originally our work was focused mainly on developing countries, so island states and Africa. That's where we started 5 years ago. It is now truly global, with also more and more work that is directly relevant to the EU, just starting some 20-30 EU work on the allocation of the 27%. And we're doing similar exercise also with ASEAN now. So that gives you a little bit the framework. In terms of cooperation with the private sector, so of course all this data collection that I mentioned, part of that is done together with the private sector. Part of it is of interest to the private sector. And we also have something called the Coalition for Action, which is focused on cooperation with the private sector. And there is a new program under the Clean Energy Ministerial, and I will say a few words on that later. It's all around the issue of corporate sourcing. So that is the framework. REmap, it's a program which we started 4 years ago, and in March of this year we issued the second edition of the global REmap. It started out with a UN initiative called Sustainable Energy for All, which called for universal access, doubling energy efficiency improvement rate, and doubling the share of renewables by 2030. These were very much political objectives, and the countries then asked us, well, that's very nice, but what would be the implications in terms of cost, in terms of country potentials, sector potentials, etc. So that's the type of questions we try to answer through REmap. The political environment has somewhat changed over the last 4 years. SE4All has resulted in an energy sustainable development goal, and that SDG 7 calls for a significant acceleration of renewables, amongst other things. So that is now, let's say, the UN agreed terminology to which REmap contributes. The REmap analysis is very much based on a country analysis. In the last edition of REmap, we assessed renewables potentials in 40 countries, covering 80% of global energy use. And we are in the process of expanding that with an additional 10 countries, so to 50 countries. And it's mainly the large economies we're focusing on for REmap. But as I said, that is complemented by other activities more specifically focused on Africa or more specifically focused on island states. So on the highest level, the REmap findings is that doubling the share of renewables is feasible and is economically attractive, and I'll now try to elaborate a bit why we think that is the case. Looking at recent renewables trends, and probably you're familiar with these numbers, last year was another record year for renewables investments. The numbers for solar PV investments vary a little bit, which source you use. Our number is 47 gigawatts of commissioned capacity, and we had 63 gigawatts of wind power installed last year. So that was a significant growth from the previous year, and if you combine that with the hydro and the bioenergy power sector capacity additions, then more than half of new power generation capacity worldwide is renewable. And that at a time when fossil fuel prices are low. And an important driver for that is, of course, that the economics are rapidly improving. The most significant recent announcement was the 800 megawatt solar PV in Dubai that has gone to an offer of less than $30 per megawatt hour. And that is in line with some very low recent project cost announcements we've seen also in Mexico and Peru. And we've seen similar low cost estimates, numbers for wind projects. So that is an important driver. And we see also that the global spread of renewables attention is improving, with now 164 countries having renewables in place. So that sets the scene. I'm now moving into the REmap, and if you have any questions during this presentation, then please you can send that over, and we'll try to answer these at the end of the webinar. So highlights, as said, we conclude that 30 to 36% renewables by 2030 is technically and economically feasible. And in fact, an important finding is, our conclusion is that there is a significant, that the benefits significantly exceed the costs by a factor 4 to 15. We'll get to that. And the combination of renewables and energy efficiency can be the core component of a strategy to limit global temperature increase well below 2 degrees as agreed in Paris end of last year. At the same time, we see that policies in place would only take us from 18.4% renewables to around 21% in 2030, which is some growth, but clearly not a doubling. And especially on the end use side, we need to increase the action. So REmap is an analysis of technology options, It is not a target setting exercise, and it is not a scenario analysis exercise. We deliberately picked this approach because we want to inform the policy-making process, but we don't want to replace the policy-making process through REmap. So goal is to provide objective information on potentials and on economics, and then that can be the basis of a policy discussion. The analysis covers the supply side, so the electricity sector and district heating, and it covers the end-use sectors, so building, industry, and transport, and of course the various interactions among these sectors. So be it competition for biomass resources, or be it the electrification of end-use sectors as to allow more renewable power to be deployed. In terms of process, so our experts, our Irena experts, work closely with the country experts, and the global analysis is complemented by country analysis, and the country analysis goes into much more detail into actions to actually, or action options to actually deploy the various options we have identified. So far we have issued 9 of these country reports, and all of them are publicly available from our website, and there's another 5 or so country reports which are in the process and will be issued in the course of this year. So today we are at 18.4% renewables as share of total final energy consumption. So final energy consumption is where you count electricity as kilowatt hours consumed, not in terms of let's say coal or gas input to generate that electricity. The reference case, so policies in place, will take us to 21%. And then we looked at additional options. First, a category of options which we call the REmap options. Let's say existing renewables options, where we looked at if these were globally deployed at a reasonable rate, where would that take us? Conclusion was that would take us to around 25% renewables. Then we looked at if the other sustainable development goals for energy are also met, so universal access and doubling of energy efficiency improvement rate, where would that take us? Because these other energy objectives have an impact on the renewables share. Conclusion is the combination of these 3 SDG goals would take us to 30% renewables. And then we looked at options which we call thinking outside the box, doubling options. Example of that is divestment in the early closure of coal and gas power plant. We looked at options for industry relocation, and we looked at accelerated innovation, for example in the area of electric mobility. And the conclusion is that if you include these thinking outside the box options, then we could get to 36%, which is roughly a doubling of where we were in 2014. You may say, well, why would you aim for a doubling? There are two main reasons. First of all, we think there is a strong economic case, which I will elaborate a little bit later. But another important driver, of course, is climate policy. If you translate this 36% renewables in total final energy consumption in primary energy terms, it's roughly the equivalent of 30% in primary terms. And what we've done in this graph is we've shown a trend for renewables share in primary energy terms from where we were in 2014 to where we need to be in 2050 if we really want to meet the climate objectives. And so if you want to grow from 13% renewables in primary energy terms in 2014 to the 50 to 70% where we need to be in 2050 if we want to reach the climate objectives, then that means for 2030 roughly 30% in primary terms or 36% in final energy consumption terms. So REmap is consistent with what has been agreed on the climate, in the climate area. Another observation is that most existing scenarios, and that includes the scenarios of the IEA, are not consistent with that climate objective. So we see that energy is clearly a big item on the climate agenda, but we have a bit the sense that climate has not yet fully arrived on the energy agenda. So that is something that could have very significant impact on the development of the energy sector in the coming decades, and it makes good business sense to be prepared for such a transition. Now, in terms of climate, well, one more graph. So we assessed what would be the climate impact of these doubling the renewables, and our conclusion is that a combination of energy efficiency and doubling renewables can limit global energy CO2 emissions to 20 gigatons in 2030, which is in line with the climate objectives. But in our assessment, the role of renewables is roughly on par with that of energy efficiency. So both aspects are really key, and combination of the two is very relevant from a climate perspective. And we assess the economics in a number of different ways. This graph is based on it's an assessment from a government perspective, from a society perspective, if you like. We took out all taxes and subsidies, and we calculated what would be the incremental cost of these doubling the renewables, and what kind of savings in terms of reduced externalities would happen. There are some additional costs. So for doubling, the additional costs are nearly 300 billion in 2030. So that is the net result of annualized, increased annualized investment cost and fossil fuel savings in 2030. It's 300 billion for the doubling options. If you purely look at the REmap options, it would be around 100 billion incremental cost. But the key point is that these incremental costs are vastly outdone by significant savings. And these savings have three components. There is a significant reduction of air pollution, outdoor air pollution, so emissions from NOx, acetone, particulate matter, and other pollutants, and the health impacts, especially of this outdoor air pollution. We also looked at reduced indoor air pollution, so that is especially replacement of traditional biomass and coal fuels in developing countries for cooking and for heating. And finally, we looked at CO2 emission mitigation, and we valued CO2 at between $20 and $80 per ton of CO2. And so we found that the overall reduced the savings or reduced externalities are somewhere between 1.2 trillion and 4.2 trillion in 2030. And so if you compare these savings with the additional cost, then the net benefits, the savings, exceed the additional cost by a factor of 4 to 15. So even if you take a very conservative view on externalities, then still the savings vastly outnumber the costs. And of course, this is a very strong rationale for implementing such policy. Now, at the same time, I should say that while there is an overall societal case for such policy, the problem is, of course, that these external effects today are not priced in the price of goods, and therefore the business case is not always there. So the key policy question is how can we reflect these external effects in the prices of goods, or how can we adjust markets to correct for these external effects. So you can do that of course by, say, a CO2 tax, but of course another way can be to subsidize renewables, or to create a regulatory environment for renewables. So the REmap options that would take us to 30% renewables would result in 116 exajoules of renewable energy, final renewable energy in 2030. Around 44% of the potential is in power generation, 10% is in transport, and 46% is in heat and other direct uses. And what this pie chart shows is also a breakdown by resource and by technology. So the main message here is that the relevance of the power sector for total renewables use increases significantly in the coming 15 years. So today, power sector accounts for around a quarter of total renewables use in total final energy terms. That share would nearly double. But at the same time, the share of the end-use sectors, so direct use of transport fuels, renewable transport fuels, and heating, remains dominant. So this also has an important policy consequence. It means that you cannot double renewables by just focusing on the power sector. You also need sufficient attention for renewables in transport and for direct use of renewables. Second point I want to make based on this graph is you see it's rather green. And green means that's applications, biomass applications. So biomass accounts for nearly half the total renewables potential, and at the same time we see that the use of bioenergy at this moment is not growing as rapidly as, for example, the use of solar and wind. So biomass has its specific issues, and we are recommending that there should be a lot more attention for developing biomass if we really want to accelerate global renewables use. Now, in terms of growth, in terms of market opportunities, if you like, we see, of course, very significant growth potential still for solar and wind. So markets that can increase 5 or 10-fold in the coming 10 years. we see also in the end-use sectors very significant growth, and of course there's a lot of attention now for electric vehicles, and rightly so. We think that the deployment that sector can really take off and grow nearly 200-fold. So very significant market opportunities. As I said in the beginning, we have just issued a new report about cost. So we have a database of today's cost of renewable technologies. And in the power sector, that database has right now 15,000 utility scale renewable projects, and it has nearly 1 million solar rooftop projects. But to date, or before, the database focused on projects which actually have been commissioned. And what we have done in recent months is we for the first time, we've done a forward-looking study. So we looked at what can you expect in terms of cost reduction potential in the next 10 years. And our conclusion is that while you've seen a very significant cost reduction in recent years, that cost reduction is just a start, and you will see continued significant cost reduction in the next 10 years. We looked at global weighted average cost of technologies. So we found that for solar PV, the levelized cost of electricity, so the kilowatt hour delivered, the cost of that could drop by 59% on average for the world between 2015 and 2025. Also for concentrating solar power, you see very significant cost reduction potential, both for the parabolic trough and for the solar tower, between 37 and 43%, and for wind, 26 to 33% cost reduction potential for onshore wind and offshore wind. And so already today, these technologies are cost competitive in many locations, and the economics will further improve in the next 10 years. And so that makes that is of course a very important driver for continued acceleration of renewables deployment, and therefore we end up with these very high growth estimates for renewables. If I take one number, that for solar PV, I think that's a nice case to illustrate how today's policies underestimate the renewables potential. So we added together the solar PV numbers of all these country reports, and that resulted in around 600 gigawatts of solar PV in 2030. And end of 2015 there was 230 gigawatts in place. We're adding around 50 gigawatts every year. So if you add 15 years, 50 gigawatts, would be no growth in the market. You would already have 1,000 gigawatts in 2030. So far more than what was in these policy plans, and also far more than what is in the greenest scenario of the IEA. Because the most green scenario of the IEA only has 900 gigawatts of solar PV in 2030 in the World Energy Outlook. So, if you assume some growth in this market, then of course we will end up far above 1,000 gigawatts in 2030, and that explains our number, which is much higher, so nearly 1,800 gigawatts of solar PV in 2030. And it's a similar case for some of the other technologies. So cost and cost reduction as a key driver and a strong economic case in these areas. Now, we see, especially in the power sector, an ongoing transformation. But as the share of renewables grows so rapidly, and especially as the share of variable renewables grows so rapidly, new challenges emerge. So there is a technical issue. How do you integrate high shares of variable renewables? At the same time, there is also important issues around market design, enabling policy frameworks and business models. And we had a very good discussion around these issues at our Innovation Week that took place last month. And the key message from that discussion was, well, maybe it's time to move on from technology to more focus on, indeed, business models and market structures. So that is where we're focusing now. At the same time, you see also some enabling issues that deserve more attention. For example, in the area of standards and quality control, and we also, at the time of the Innovation Week, we issued a report scaling up variable renewable power, the role of grid codes. So, and that is very well received. There's a lot of traction now, and it discusses how you should adjust your grid codes to enable and to facilitate much higher shares of variable renewables. So standards and quality control is another area where we have a lot of cooperation with the private sector. So we looked across the sectors and across the countries, what are the renewables potentials. We see especially challenges in the transport sectors, and we see a number of applications in the transport sector, in the end-use sectors, where today, in fact, it's not so easy to deploy renewables economically. You can say that is a challenge, or at the same time you can interpret that as a great business opportunity. Of course, if you can find solutions here, and if the pressure is on to accelerate renewables across all these sectors, then something needs to happen in these other applications as well. So we are also looking into innovative solutions, innovative technology solutions to actually accelerate renewables in industry and in transport. So moving to the manufacturing industry, that is one of the challenging sectors. Of course, 3/4 of the energy use is in energy-intensive industries: iron and steel, cement, petrochemicals, etc. Economics is a big issue there. Scale is another big issue there. But at the same time, we see an increasing number of at least demonstration projects, also including renewables, either based on biomass or based on solar thermal or based on electrification. And also we see more regional types of solutions. To give you an idea, earlier this week I was at an offshore wind conference in Rotterdam, and the discussion there was, well, can't we build islands in the North Sea where we produce hydrogen or ammonia on using offshore wind, and then ship that for petrochemical industries onshore. So there are all kinds of new ideas emerging, and that may also result in new business opportunities. in terms of investment needs for an energy transition, so we need to increase the annual investments fourfold between now and 2030. So that means significant additional business opportunity. And in terms of where these investments are, so on average for the period 2016-2030, it means 770 billion of investments per year. 3/4 of that is in the power sector, but I should add that the end-use sectors here includes only the conversion processes. So for example, for transport, what is listed here is only investments in biofuel production. What is not included here is the cost of electric vehicles. And if you would include these costs, they're of course very significant. It's a very significant market opportunity. But the problem of including them in this type of analysis is what part of an electric vehicle do you call a renewable energy investment? So we have the investment numbers, but we've not included it here with the renewables investments. And if you look at the market opportunities then by the regional split, so this shows you the power sector investment needs per country. You see China is by far the largest, but the investment volume in China that is needed is roughly on par with today's investment volume in China. So that's the red bar. While for the US and for India, you see that there is a significant need to ramp up investments further in order to be on that doubling pathway. And we're also working on enabling financing, and so we look into different aspects, including, of course, enabling policy frameworks, but also risk mitigation instruments, and that's something we will be discussing also with the G20 in 2 weeks in China. So let's see if we can have some traction there. Market opportunities, as said, China is the largest opportunity. That accounts for around 20% of the total global renewables potential, followed by the United States, 15%, and followed by Europe, 14%. So these three together account for around half of the renewables potential, and then the rest of the world for the other half. Now, you really need to look in the country specifics. What this graph shows is the renewable share by country for these 40 countries we assessed. It shows today's share, or 2013 share, development and reference case with policy in place, then the REmap options, and then the doubling options. And you see a range in renewable share in 2030 from 10% on the right to 90% on the left. So you see a very different outlook, and also a very different starting point, of course, by country. Now this work continues. As I said in the beginning, we are working on a number of additional country reports. Dominican Republic will be launched 28th of July. India will follow second half of September. Indonesia will follow after the summer break. Russia probably in November. South Africa is ongoing. ASEAN analysis is also planned for September, October, and the EU 2030 analysis also around October. In fact, first results are already available. So a lot of country-specific analysis and increasingly also regional type of analysis. Then we are also well linked into a number of global discussions, including the G20. And we have just prepared a new report on REmap for G20 that will be launched in 2 weeks in Beijing. And we hope it can be a basis for the G20 to discuss a joint plan how to accelerate renewables. We have published all the results. We try to be transparent, so the results per country are now online, but they're still in a PDF format of tables, and we are working now to make these data also more easily accessible in an Excel format, a spreadsheet format. This country and regional analysis is supplemented by sectoral analysis. We looked into the synergies between renewables and energy efficiency. We're working on a new report on renewables for district heating and cooling. And the transport sector roadmap will be issued soon, and also a report on renewables potential for cities. And as I already said, we continue to expand the country coverage. So there's a number of countries where the analysis is just starting now, and we plan the next issue of the global report early 2018. So in terms of private sector engagement, I hope I've given you a bit of a feel of what we're trying to do. Our primary clients are, of course, countries, because that's our membership, but we think there are important synergies also with the private sector, and we want to work more on that. And for that purpose, we would propose to establish a private sector working group on this issue. And I hope this presentation has given you a little bit of a flavor of why that could be of interest. Now, one last slide on corporate sourcing. It's an initiative under the Clean Energy Ministerial, and that meeting took place in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. And there was a new campaign launched on corporate sourcing of renewables that let's say that originates very much from a trend we see in the US, where last year 52% of all renewable power was directly sourced by large companies from project developers. So it doesn't even go through utilities anymore. And that is a model that seems to be working well, and that could have much wider application. So for that purpose, the CEM countries, number of CEM countries, and Irena together set up an initiative on that, with the purpose to work with the private sector how to further apply this approach. We think it could have very significant potential and an impact on global renewables deployment. So if that is of interest, we would be very happy to provide further information how you can join. So this concludes the overview presentation. Now, as I said in the beginning, if there are questions, we're happy to answer these. I see here there is a question on savings greatly exceed costs at the macro level, but what needs to be done to help businesses to realize these savings? Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's we see a big gap between the government rationale for something like this and the actual business case. And so there is a number of ways to correct for that. Of course, ideally you would like to endogenize the external effects, but that is a discussion that has been going on for quite some time, and it's not so easy in many sectors, in many cases. Where that is not possible, a second best policy is to support renewables instead of to add these increased costs for fossil. Or to create specific regulations. For example, a portfolio standard could be an alternative approach to endogenizing CO2 impacts into the prices of fossil electricity. We do a lot of work on policy frameworks and best practice in policy frameworks. And for example, together with the IEA, we have a database of policies, renewable energy policies in countries. So and we do, for example, we've looked at design of auctions and then other types of renewable policy instruments. Another question is you mentioned the significant cost fall, but this is a global picture. What does this imply on a country or regional level? Through this cost database that I mentioned, we have looked also at the cost at the country level and at the region level, and it's true we find significant differences. And a good example is solar PV. So rooftop solar PV projects are twice as expensive in the US and in Japan, for example, as in Germany or in China. And a big part of that cost difference is caused by the maturity of markets, but also the red tape plays an important role. So how many permits do you need for developing a project? And we conclude that there is a significant potential to reduce these what's called balance of system other cost to reduce cost in these countries with high cost today. So that is an important part of the overall cost reduction potential. It's more these other costs than purely technology cost. So that concludes the questions we have received. This webinar has been recorded and it will be posted online. So if you want to revisit parts of it, then that will be possible. And of course, if there are any additional questions, you can reach us by phone or by email. And the email address is remap@irena.org. And we would be happy to continue this discussion. So this concludes this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention and have a good day.